Tackle the shackles.
Hello, everybody. This is Tackle the Shackles, Out for Life, streaming live podcast. This is your host of the Most High God. Listen, we deliver every week when it comes to excellent, special guests. We're not going to come short of that this week. And I'm telling you, we have a fantabulous guest tonight. Get ready to learn, get ready to be empowered, get ready to be encouraged. We have none other than Burrell Ellis. But before I bring Burrell Ellis up, I'm going to bring up my co-host. You know him already. He doesn't even need an introduction. His name is Buddy Curry. What's up, buddy?
Hey, Lee. Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
Hey, man, buddy, we got a good one. You and I we can just take it easy tonight because guess what? We want to get as much information out of our guests that we possibly can. I know if anybody had Mr. Ellis on, he would have an honorarium bigger than your paycheck and my paycheck. But we gonna take a vacation tonight and ask a few questions, but we want to let him go tonight. All right. But buddy, I appreciate you. Love you, man. Hey man, last time we were in prison, not when we went to prison, but when we were doing prison ministry, hey man, that was an awesome, I would say that was an awesome situation. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think every week presents a new one of the return to citizens wants to be coached, and I'm really impressed and blessed by how vulnerable they are and how all of the guys in the room try to help them with whatever it is, and we're able to extract some truth, some ownership, accountability, and I think that man's going to be successful when he gets out. Really impressed.
Very much impressed, and it's really cool how there's an organic conversation going on, and all of a sudden, we have co-coaches. The guys, they got a whole lot to offer, right? When somebody else is being coached.
Yeah, that's right.
Amen. All right, so we're gonna bring you back up in just a minute, buddy, and then we'll bring Mr. Ellis up, and then we'll take care of some business after that. Okay?
Okay.
Awesome. Well, like I told you, if you out there and it seems like folk are slowly getting on for some reason, we're gonna make sure Precious sent out another link out there. But I'm gonna tell you, we are excited about our guest today. And this is recorded, so this is going to be able to go out on our social media, and others going to tap into that as well. But I want to bring up my new friend, Mr. Burrell Ellis. Mr. Ellis.
Pastor Lee, it's nice to see you tonight. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, it's a blessing to have you, and we're looking forward to picking your brain tonight. All right.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Amen. God bless you so much. We'll see you in just a minute. Amen. Mr. Burrell Ellis. Now, I want you guys to, like I said, go ahead and subscribe, and make sure you send this link to your Facebook, your Instagram, all your YouTube channels that you have, and let's get the word out that we have a special guest tonight. With that being said, we always like to make sure we set and marinate the night with the purpose of Tackle the Shackles. We know that Tackle the Shackles is about solving reentry problems, changing the narrative. Yes, changing the narrative in order that we will have those who've been justice impacted, those who have been formerly incarcerated, those who have gone through the prison system, and some are still, hopefully don't go to the prison system. And so with that being said, we want to tackle some shackles right now with this video.
In the U.S., a staggering 2.2 million people are incarcerated, a 500% increase over the past 30 years. 1 in 4 prisoners were foster children. 1 in 28 American children has a parent behind bars. A public defender will routinely have a caseload of more than 100 clients at a time. States spend $2.8 billion annually to incarcerate people for non-criminal rule violations. More than 10% of the incarcerated in the U.S. are veterans, while less than 1% of our citizens serve. More than half are there due to PTSD and substance abuse. Veterans are losing their freedom because of defending ours. Tackle the Shackles, a mega movement to create culture change. Not just inside courtrooms and prisons, but within society. Organizations, activists, and legislators are struggling to pass laws to reform the broken justice and prison systems. This is primarily because the public either doesn't know or doesn't care about the injustices and suffering of those caught up in these systems. The key to success is to make it trendy to be informed and care about our incarcerated citizens. Tackle the Shackles is a national community coalition between athletes, churches, police, service providers, prisons, legislators, and the public to bring about better second chances and reduce recidivism. The coalition also promotes criminal justice and prison reform to ensure fairness in courtrooms, reasonable sentences, and that prison time is rehabilitative instead of punitive. As our country is struggling to find answers to the shackles, issues of inequality, racism, and injustice, it is an ideal and critical time to implement the tackles, real solutions, and reform. Tackle the Shackles is the movement to unify our country and educate about the depth of the criminal justice issues as we reveal and implement solutions. Tackle the Shackles.
Welcome back to Tackle the Shackles Out for Life streaming live podcast. This is your host of the Most High God, Lee Robbins. Listen, we're excited always about what is happening in the lives of those who are formerly incarcerated, those who have been through this transition. We've seen many, since we got started a little bit over 6 months ago with this podcast. We've seen several people come up with awesome testimonies that some from rags to riches, others that have come up here and shared some very critical knowledge about prison reform. Welcome, everybody. We thank you for our audience that are here. We appreciate your presence, and we thank you. Buddy, come on back up and, hey, man, just a minute, and let's chat for a second here, and then we'll bring up Mr. Ellis back again. Yeah, buddy, since you've been working with, this prison reform and working with returning citizens, you are a hands-on kind of guy. I can remember you wanting to come to our reentry home and said, let me coach a couple of those guys. And I guess that's been a little bit over 6 months, 7 months or so ago, a little bit longer. In your opinion, what do you feel that needs to happen and what needs to be done to bring about reducing prison recidivism?
Oh, yeah, I think, from my chair, what I've been involved with is guys that are already in. And I think as soon as they get in, the faster we can get to them and begin to coach them, begin to come along their side, bring about a care and bring about a resource that they may not have had. I think there'll be more hope there. The other thing is that I love the transition center that we're working at in one of the prisons, and it's a way to kind of stick your toe in the water and then begin to work and begin to save money and experience some more decision making, and I really like that. And then also I like the reentry home, and for the transition, when these guys are getting out of prison and they're faced with all the decision and the family pressures, it can just be debilitating, and it may lead them to go back to some of the habits they had. And
Yeah,
well, I think a transition, a better transition where there's resources which you provide, Lee, through your system, I think is would be very helpful. But get them as fast as we can once they get in and start serving their sentence.
yeah, and I know that you also work with kids, through Kids and Pros, and you're part of the prevention process, and now working on the rehabilitation process. There's a process before that even happens, and what happens in the middle in terms of mass incarceration, what's happening in our society, people being whatever it is. And that's what we're going to deal with today. We're talking about there's prosecutory impact on the criminal justice system. And I really believe we have a guest today to speak on that, the prosecutory. But let me have Mr. Ellis to come up, and I want to give a very warm introduction about his credentials and who he is. Brother Ellis, before you speak, and then we're going to let you go, I just want to make sure everybody understands who you are and where you come from. But here it is. I'm just going to read this. Mr. Burrell Ellis Jr. has long been recognized by the citizens of Georgia for the vital role he has played in the public service and for his deep personal commitment to the welfare of all. In 2000, while working as a partner in a national law firm, he was elected to the Dekalb County Board of Commissioners. In 2008, he was overwhelmingly elected as Dekalb County's Chief Executive Officer, and then reelected in 2012 as CEO of Dekalb County, which covers 240 square miles and 12 municipalities, including portions of the city of Atlanta. Mr. Burrell was responsible for managing the county's watch this, y'all, $1.2 billion annual budget, 7,000 employees, 26 departments, and delivery of services to its 740,000 citizens. Mr. Burrell Ellis, God bless you. Thank you for coming.
God bless you, Pastor Lee Robbins, and good to see you, Buddy Curry. And I want to thank you for your ministry, for Tackle the Shackles, and the good work that you're doing to address a very serious issue, maybe the most consequential issue of our times, and that is mass incarceration in our broken criminal legal system. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for being the host of the Most High God. And thank you for having me on your program tonight.
You're welcome. Yes, sir. We know that you are a heavy hitter from the start, but one of the reasons why I took some great interest, I met you at GGRA, Greater Gwinnett Reentry Alliance, and you were one of the speakers there. And I took a picture with you. I don't even know if you remember that, but I got you on my camera. We took a picture together. It wasn't a mug shot. It was a picture that we.
Well, whatever it was, I'm honored to have been there. And it's where God placed me in a moment. So
I was extremely impressed with what you said there. They had the news out at that time, and I've been following you and been watching. And you have a unique experience being justice involved or being impacted by the criminal justice system. We have our theme here, prosecutory impact on criminal justice system. Tell us we'll just let you roll with it and speak to us. I'm actually giving you the pulpit and saying, preach, brother, preach.
Well, what an honor. Thank you, Pastor. Let me tell
Okay.
you, on this topic of prosecutorial impact on the criminal legal system, and I intentionally refer to it as the criminal legal system as opposed to the criminal justice system, because as I am and many others are all too familiar, the system is less than just. The situation for me, and bear in mind that I'm a lawyer by training, not one who practiced in the criminal legal system, but I'm a lawyer by training. And I did not fully comprehend the extent to which prosecutors hold unchecked power within the legal system until I was targeted by the legal system. Now, we know that the criminal system disproportionately targets people of color. One of the things, I guess, that was shocking to me was not only the level to which prosecutors can bring charges against people, but the way they can shape those charges and shape a narrative, and in my case, where a crime wasn't even committed. Because of systemic racism that we face in this country, one of the major hurdles that we had to overcome was, first and foremost, the amount of unchecked power of the prosecutor, and the way he was able to keep out good evidence, as opposed to, in my case, and I certainly don't want to paint a broad brush and say that this applies to all district attorneys, all prosecutors in the United States of America. I mean, there are certainly people who serve, and they serve with good intention, and they are trying to do what is right and what is just. And I applaud public servants who serve in that vein. The problem, though, with having so much unchecked power, no matter who you are and serving in that role, is that unchecked power tends to corrupt. And when you have people who have such absolute power, then, as the saying goes, absolute power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely. And so there is a tremendous amount of power and control within the system that lies in the hands of prosecutors. We heard over and over again, right from the outset, once charges were levied, what we heard was that, well, he must have done something wrong, even from people who didn't understand what that something was. And the reasoning behind that thought was that he wouldn't be here unless he had done something wrong.
Yeah,
and that
I can understand that 100, because that happened to me as well. You know, he must have done something wrong. Listen, I want to make sure you have the audio is very clear. Could you turn your volume down just a little bit? It's got a little static when you speak. Just bring your, and then speak a little bit. Let me see if it make a difference.
Okay, I've turned it down some. Is that too low? More?
No, I can still hear you. We still hear a little static, but that's okay.
Okay, I'm gonna try to bring it down just a tad more. And how are we doing?
That's good. We'll go with it. Let's go.
Okay.
We can go with it.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
And my apologies. I guess that's my mic. Hold on. Let me check. Okay, I muted the mic, so I better leave this alone.
Yeah, you good.
Let me try one more thing.
Okay.
On the audio side. And Pastor, I think we better stop while we're ahead.
Yeah. Well, you were just talking about, you know, he must have done something wrong. He must have done. That's while he's here.
The one of the tenets purportedly of our civil liberties and civil rights, constitutional rights in the United States of America, is that a criminally accused has a right to a trial by a jury of his or her peers. And that's a very difficult concept to live out, because the question becomes, who are our peers? And the system is designed so that people who have a level of awareness about politics, about the law,
Mhm.
about how things function in any kind of a system in life, a level
Mhm.
of maturity, they tend to be excluded from juries. They tend
Mm.
to be stricken. People who were well read were less favored over people who maybe like to read, and I'm not making this up. This is exactly what happened in my case. Love novels, romance novels.
Mm.
There was one uh, black male juror who had recently read, because these are questions that they ask the people in the jury pool. You know, what have you read recently? And he had recently read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. Well, he was excluded from the jury just based upon that. He
Mm.
had a broadened perspective. But we had a number of jurors who, as I mentioned, read romance novels, and they were allowed to stay on, and they weren't active voters. They weren't
Mm.
active politically by any measure or stretch, and they didn't really know much about what was going on in their government.
Mhm.
Likewise, Black people were systemically excluded from, in my case, my jury. So, you know, some people did get on who were Black. You know, it wasn't an all, I didn't face an all white jury, but
Mm.
a number of Black potential jurors were investigated by the prosecution,
Mm.
and if the prosecution found that they hadn't paid the bills on time, or
Mhm.
they had gone through a divorce and didn't pay their alimony as scheduled, they were
Mm.
deemed as bad citizens. That information about them that probably they would have preferred be kept private, or at least not aired in a public courtroom, was in fact aired by the district attorney. And so, just by virtue of the fact that they were trying to fulfill their civic duty of sitting on a jury, they
Mm.
were investigated by the district attorney.
Oh
And
my.
then, just for maybe difficulty in paying bills, that was used as reasoning to deem them as bad citizens and kept off a jury. Now, we're not talking about 1865 and we're not talking about 1965. We're
Mhm.
talking about this occurred in 2015 in my case.
Hmm.
So this is what happens, and and these are the kind of racial biases that enter the equation when you have a Black accused. We watched as young Black men in orange suits, shackled together, were paraded in and out of the courtroom. Again, we're not talking about in 1865. We're talking about in 2015. And it was very
Mm.
disheartening to see this. And you ask yourself why. 1960, Martin Luther King was arrested on a probation violation for a bogus traffic charge. He was taken to the DeKalb County Courthouse. He was convicted, he was jailed, and he was sent off to prison, a work
Mm.
camp, a chain gang, if you will, where it was hoped by those in charge that he would be made an example of and maybe never even return to general society, maybe
Mm.
even ever heard of or seen again. Coretta Scott King, being alarmed by what was happening to Dr. King, placed a few calls. And she ended up being able to get in touch with both presidential nominees at the time, one being Richard Nixon and the other John Kennedy. Richard Nixon elected not to do anything. John Kennedy went into action. She was concerned because Dr. King was taken to DeKalb County, which
Mm.
was known and which she referred to as Klan country. That was
Mm.
DeKalb County in 1960. Fast forward 55 years. I was taken to the DeKalb County Courthouse. I was suffered a conviction like Dr. King. I was
Mhm.
immediately escorted out the courtroom without any opportunity for an appeal bond. The same thing happened. What was different? What was
Mm.
different is in 1960, Dr. King faced a system with all white folks in charge. In
Mm.
2015, I faced a system with a number of Black people in charge, a Black
Mm.
district attorney, a Black judge, who routinely had those young Black men being escorted through her courtroom, sent off to prison, chained together. And I wasn't treated much better in that courtroom, I will say. So what difference did it make that the faces had changed from 1960 to 2015? I think that unless you change the way the system operates, changing the faces that head that system will never be enough. And we like to sanitize racism. We like to talk about the Hollywood version where white people in hoods come around and burn a cross in a black person's yard and do, admittedly, some very awful things. But we have to understand when systems are rotten, when systems themselves are racist, then the same racist acts that are perpetrated continue no matter who's in charge. And so when we look at the criminal legal system in the United States of America, from DeKalb County to the state of Georgia, and beyond, we have to recognize that it's a system that disproportionately targets people of color. We have to recognize there's a system that incarcerates more people than any other legal system in the world by a wide margin. And we have to recognize that if we want it to act different, then we need to change the system. Our goal should be to fix that which is broken, not to simply punish people who violate societal norms. And then sometimes are laws that are simply created to criminalize really normal behavior in order to target people who we would prefer to keep enslaved, i.e. people of color. And so I know I've said a mouthful. I see some comments. I want you to get some questions in, Pastor. But we need to fundamentally change our legal system if we're going to live up to America's promise of being the home of the brave and the land of the free.
So I hear you saying that the system that was built way back then, that was racist back then, is the same system that we're dealing with today, even though we got different people running it. You had more of someone opposite in how we look back then running it. Now we got people that more look like us that's running DeKalb system, but the system is still doing what it does, right?
I think by and large that's true. Now, I want to acknowledge that there have been some significant changes made in recent years, and we have seen incarceration rates go down to some degree. And as we've seen incarceration rates go down for a time, we also have seen crime rates decrease, especially violent crime. But we fall back on the same knee-jerk reactions. When crime began to creep back up, the easy answer is always to fall back on more policing, more incarcerations, more convictions, lock people up, throw away the key. What we have to understand, and you and I have talked about this, I don't want to live in a crime-ridden neighborhood. Absolutely. I don't want to live in a crime-ridden society. I don't think anybody wants to live in that kind of a world. But we have to look to what actually fixes a problem, not just be so punitive or punishment-oriented. Prison is inhumane, excuse me. It's an inhumane, it's a degrading experience. Maybe some think that's what it should be. But being that is not fixing the problem. We want to live in a society where crime is alleviated. We want to live in a society, I think ideally, where people are rehabilitated, where people can fundamentally live out to be their best selves. We want to live in a world that seeks to make people right.
No, well, we lost you on the audio, Mr. Ellis. We lost you on the audio. Let's see. keep speaking, and sorry about that. Still cannot. Let me see. That's strange. Hold on a second. We still try to say something now. Nope. I am so sorry, guys. We're having technical difficulties. Maybe you can come back in. Meanwhile, we'll take care of some other things. Bring Buddy back up. Buddy, amen. As Mr. Ellis get his mic set up and back going. What do you think about some of the things that he's already shared with us about systemic racism that's in the system, not necessarily by those who are operating it, but those who are implementing it, the system that is already there, the laws that are already there that come from still on the books from many, many years ago. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know what the laws are. I don't have any experience in the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
I am just all ears and learning. So I don't have a comment because I'm not going to comment on something I don't understand very well. Right.
And that's good wisdom. There are, we know that I always think it's not a black thing or a white thing, but it's a green thing. That our criminal justice system has become more about money. Because if you close down some of these systems today that capture some of the poor people who can't afford a lawyer, at least a good lawyer, to get them off for some of the things that good lawyers get people off on, then they become a part of the system. And once you get part of the system, it is virtually very difficult to break away from that system because it's always on your record. It follows you. And so when a lot of times we don't want to fix that because some cities will probably crash if they didn't have these individuals coming in, paying court costs, paying for their fines. All of these things add up to keeping a system millions and millions and millions of dollars. In some of the smaller areas, if you closed it down, which some of them were built upon that, it will literally shut down some jobs and some opportunities for people in that particular city. So it's, to me, it's more of a green thing, even though there are some laws I do believe that are still inundated. It's some old laws that are still on the system that should have been done away with a long time ago. Case in point, I'll give you an example of a law. For those who commit drug crimes, right? They commit drug crimes. They literally cannot get, once they come out, they no longer can get food stamps. All right. What does a drug crime got to do with food stamps? They can't get their driver's license back in place. These are things that are set up for continual failure. So we were just talking, Mr. Ellis, are you there? Can we?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thumbs up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah. We were just.
I was just getting warmed up.
We're just getting. Well, we're going to sit back and listen and let you keep on going and moving forward. Hey, man, if you could pick up where you left off.
I'm not sure where I left off. I'm trying to. Can you remind me what the last thing you heard was?
Yeah, we're going to let the audience remind you of that. Y'all remember what he's talking about? Make sure y'all were listening to what he was talking about. Let's see. They're going to come up. You were talking about the system was created to keep Black folks enslaved, free labor, and continued control.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what one person says there.
I can connect to that. I think that when we talk about a systemic racism and how the system is broken, we have to recognize the system is doing exactly what it was created to do. And
Okay.
it is an extension of slavery in the United States of America. It is fulfilling the goal that it was created of, particularly targeting and keeping enslaved in many ways Black and brown people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to suggest by any means that we are the only ones who are kept enslaved by the system. Certainly, there are large numbers of white people who are incarcerated and who walk around with criminal records, but we have to recognize that Black and brown people are disproportionately targeted by the system. It's a costly system, and it's a system that in the end, in the final analysis, doesn't really serve us well. Because if we're not fundamentally working to reduce crime, to improve lives, to make people better, if all we're doing is making people worse by incarcerating them and then recycling them back in the system, then not only are we harming the people who are being incarcerated, but we're impacting families and we're impacting communities in a very significant way. And that affects everyone. And so we need to do a reanalysis of what works. And there ought to be a recognition that prosecutors, since we're specifically talking about prosecutorial impact, we should remind ourselves of two things. And this requires public engagement and for the public to be involved. First and foremost, a prosecutor's job is to do more than merely seek a conviction. A prosecutor's job and duty is to seek justice. And justice requires many things. In some instances, it may, a conviction may be the best way to go about it. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. But at other times, a sentence that involves prison doesn't necessarily make sense. One of the things that struck me, and it's different when you read about it than when you see it. I mean, it's different when you see it than when you read about it, I should say. One of the things that struck me during my time inside of a prison was not only the raw numbers of people that were there, but the waste of human potential that was represented by the numbers of people that were there. And so how that rehabilitated people who were receiving no rehabilitation, who weren't receiving any kind of mental health treatment, because prison is traumatic, it's dehumanizing to be strip searched every time you go into a visitation room. And if you have to go to the bathroom, to be strip searched when you left the visitation room. And then when you came back to see your family again, to be strip searched and have people look into your cavities and do all the things that people don't like to talk about, but that actually happens inside a prison. To have to live day to day and worry about whether somebody is going to slit your throat or what might happen to you. I mean, there is little good that comes from taking, in my case and many others, people who are productive, wage-earning members of society that are providing for their families and others out of society, making them a tax burden on society, and then putting such a stigma on them when they come out that they can't continue to be productive at the level they were when they left and have no chance of redemption.
Absolutely.
That is inhumane, that is unjust,
Yes.
and that is just ungodly.
Yeah, and you're right on, because the system is not really serving its cause and purpose. It's not deterring crime. It's not deterring crime. It's not making people better or empowering people. It's supposed to get us to a place of repentance. That's the original purpose, to repent, to change our mind and direction. But it seems like we criminalize people even more so, and they learn it becomes an institution of crime a lot of times, because
if a person files bankruptcy, they are given an opportunity to pay off their debt. And when their debts are paid, They come out of bankruptcy with what's called a quote unquote clean slate. If a person is convicted, they are sent away to prison, and then they are not only stigmatized as, the terms we use, ex-felon and other kinds of things. They have to check a box when they seek jobs and when they seek housing and when they seek federal assistance. And so they're never given that same opportunity to pay their debt to society. It's an unforgivable, unpaid. In fact, when you file bankruptcy, you don't even have to pay off the debt many times. You only have to pay off maybe a few cents on the dollar. But once you pay off those few cents on the dollar, you get that clean slate. And when you're incarcerated, and then you lay that's an extra layer of racism that you lay on top of particularly, Black and brown people who already carry the burdens of racism. When you're incarcerated, then that stigma is multiplied in such a way that it gains interest. And the interest is so harsh that it never gets paid off. It can never be paid off. And so we continue to recycle those people in and out of the system.
So we can see why there's 67% recidivism rate that keeps people coming in and out of the system.
Technical violations.
Yeah, technical stuff. Yeah.
You don't give me an opportunity to work, but then you expect me to pay my child support.
Oh my. Listen, we're going to take some questions here from the audience. We got a couple of questions I'd like for you to try to chime in and answer. Here's one right here. Can you read that one for us?
You want me to read it?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is from Lawrence. It says, what is a better way to fix a problem besides just putting people in prison? It's not fixing the problem. One of the things I think that, thank you, Lawrence, for that question. I think that when we talk about mass incarceration, we have to understand that it's a term that is not really fully understood or grasped by many, and that's unfortunate. If you read books like Michelle Alexander's book, she talks about mass incarceration and it being a level of incarceration. People who are against or people who favor, I should say, ending mass incarceration, as I do, are not necessarily in favor of ending all incarceration. There may be people, because of the nature of their actions, who need to be removed from society for some period of time. Okay. But there ought to be some opportunity within that period of time to redeem oneself. I mean, we know that there were major prophets in the Bible who committed, some bad acts. But from a God view, there was nothing that anyone did. I mean, you can look at Moses and you can look at Paul or Saul, and you can, see some of the things they did, but they were redeemed by the Lord and sent to a higher purpose. And so we ought to operate from the same mindset that everyone is redeemable, and we ought to be willing to extend grace. Now, everybody, though, doesn't need to be incarcerated, certainly not at the numbers that we incarcerate people now. There are some crimes that simply aren't violent. Maybe they're harmful, but they're not violent. And maybe people need to be given an opportunity to learn a better way of conducting themselves. Maybe they need to be given the opportunity to pay back what they have taken and to make it right, to restore.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean throwing someone in a cell and throwing away the key for a number of years.
Right.
And destroying lives at great cost, both monetarily and to society as a whole. The key issue that we should always struggle with is the one that was shared to me by my friend Roland Washington, who is, with another organization that I'm involved with and I strongly believe in. That's the National Incarceration Association.
Yes.
And Roland has always challenged me. He said, Burrell, we have to examine what went wrong here? Was it mental illness? Was it an addiction? Was it a bad upbringing? But what went wrong here? And how do we fix it? That ought to be the key. And that's not an easy answer. That's not necessarily even a cookie cutter answer, but that is a humane answer. That is a godly answer. That is an answer that seeks a higher purpose. That is an answer that helps us reach what Dr. King referred to as the beloved community. That is the answer that we ought to be seeking. Not simply someone committed a crime. And we have to understand that a lot of these so-called crimes are only crimes because they're behaviors that someone labeled to be a crime in order to entrap people into the system. Like vagrancy, loitering, nuisance laws, noise laws. I mean, these are sometimes things that are just used in order to target people within certain communities and lock them up. Exercise of the vote for Black people has been a crime in this country. These aren't corruptible behaviors. And we ought to balance, since again we're talking about prosecutorial conduct here, we ought to examine the role of prosecutors. Why should prosecutors who seek to hold, and I say this with all due respect actually to those prosecutors who are serious and thoughtful and conduct their roles in a way where they actually seek justice, but it is very enticing to have a level of power that is largely unchecked. And why should prosecutors who seek to hold other people accountable for their actions not be held accountable when they commit misdeeds, when they are malicious, when they are wrong, intentionally so? Why do they have this absolute immunity, which is a higher level of immunity than we give police officers?
Wow.
Let's talk about that. And you know why you don't know? You may not have known that.
I didn't know that.
And Buddy, you may not have known that. And I don't know how many people in our audience knows that. But the reason you know that is because most of the work that prosecutors do is hidden from public view. Now, because of the body cams, we now see what police officers do. We can watch their work and we can go back. But we don't see what prosecutors do. It's done in the shadows of the legal system. We don't see how they make decisions to charge certain individuals. We don't see how they put pressure on people that causes them to lie against their brother or their sister. We don't see how they manipulate evidence and withhold evidence in order to get a conviction as opposed to seeking truth and justice. Some, not all, but some. And certainly that's what happened in my case.
Yeah. Oh, that happened in my case too, as well. I mean, documents changed.
And far too many.
Too many situations, and a lot of times they know what the outcome is going to be, and they seek that outcome even before the trial or the witnesses are there. They're seeking that outcome.
So the answer, I think, is because,
and when we say they, we're just talking about in general. We're not talking about all, right? No. We're not talking about every last one of them. Right?
We're talking about a system that encourages that fosters that, not about an individual. And so I think our goal is, how do we educate the public so that they become aware of these influences that negatively impact a system that most would acknowledge is broken and unjust? And how do we empower them through the ballot and through their voices to change those things that are broken?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question about a court-appointed lawyer that's given to individuals. The individuals can't afford their own lawyer. They have to be assigned a court-appointed lawyer so justice can be spoken through that lawyer. What are your experiences with those who've had court-appointed lawyers as it relates to systemic?
I was watching the video presentation at the beginning of this podcast, and one of the things I saw was how overworked, for example, public defenders are. Court-appointed lawyers are often public defenders, and lawyers, private lawyers who take on the responsibility of representing an accused, but people who simply don't have the resources to afford legal representation. And it's unfortunate that, I mean, the reality is that that can often impact the type of representation you get. If you can afford to pay a lawyer, which most of us cannot, who can devote, full-time and attention to your case, then more aspects of the case. I mean, a criminal case is complex. The prosecution is being paid by the public. The defense is being paid either out of the pocket of the defendant or being underpaid by the public. The resources are simply not equalized. Now, what I think the answer is? I think the answer is that public defenders should be paid and compensated, and the officers should be funded at the same level as prosecutors, so that people can have the same sort of level of defense as those who are levying charges against them. And I think that when prosecutors fail to turn over what's called exculpatory evidence, mitigating evidence, then they ought to be held accountable. The reality is that they do that, many do that as a practice, and are never held responsible, when they're caught. So not only are they not, subject to, very seldom subject to sanctions, but if I were to commit that level of a fraud, I mean, in fact, I had a prosecutor accuse me of committing a fraud that never existed. So you and I can be, it's deemed criminal if it's on one side of the table.
Right.
The scales of justice, if you think of Lady Justice, justice should be blind, but it should also be balanced. And it is neither blind nor balanced in reality.
Wow. Hey, y'all, we getting the real uncut truth about a lot of things, whether you have a different opinion about that or not, and you probably do, and that's okay to have a different opinion. But we're really actually talking about somebody that is a lawyer that has, y'all heard the introduction. He's overseeing a county, and he's got the credentials and the experience. He's right there in the middle of that, was falsely accused or whatever in that situation, was led to prison, and then went to the Supreme Court and got it turned around and came out. So we're talking about someone who's got the credentials, who's got the experience, somebody who also was just unjustly incarcerated, and then got it overturned by the Supreme Court, and now is speaking to us right now. That has got something to say now, and we know that these are some realities that you talk about in terms of systemic. What can we do to change the system to make it fair and blind? A system that will work for everybody. Is that's what you're saying, Attorney Ellis?
I think that we have to understand that this is a multi-headed hydra. This onion, as they say, has a lot of layers on it. And there are a number of drivers of mass incarceration. We have over-sentencing. We have prosecutors who hold way too much power within the criminal legal system, even if their prosecutors are well-intentioned. We have unjust bail requirements, which allow people who can afford it to buy their freedom, and those who can't to be forced to sit in jail. And anybody who's sitting in jail pre-trial while they're deemed presumably innocent is forced to say, I did it, or whatever the prosecution wants them to say in order to get out so they can take care of their families and go to work and do all the things that are necessary for us to do to live as human beings. So, we need bail reform. We need sentencing reform. We need prosecutorial reform, and I'm probably reentry reform. We got a system that just recycles people in and out of itself, and then we have a system that's racist on top of all that. So we don't have enough time. I think you told me the show's only an hour. Is that right,
Yeah.
Pat? Okay. So we don't have enough time to talk about all the fixes. But since tonight's topic is prosecutorial impact, then I would offer, one or two. And the one, as I've already said, is I would personally like to see a change in the laws. This is only going to come from the people, because it won't come from the legislators until the people demand that it happen. And the people won't demand that it happen until they're better educated. I got educated because I went through the system. You got educated because you went through the system. And it's hard to get to where we are if you or a close loved one hasn't gone through the system, unfortunately. I don't wish that on anybody. But prosecutors wield this tremendous amount of unchecked power. They should not, just as police officers shouldn't have this qualified immunity, which gives them a presumption that they acted in correctly, and we know they don't. We now know that. Prosecutors shouldn't be given an even higher level of immunity, which is referred to as absolute immunity. Prosecutors are mostly elected officials. They're on the ballot, and they routinely get reelected time and time again because the public generally doesn't understand what the prosecutor does. The prosecutor should be there to protect us, to watch after us, and the prosecutor ought to be as held accountable as any other elected official. When I was county executive over DeKalb County, and when I was the county commissioner before that, people didn't hesitate to stop me whether I was pumping gas in my car, buying my groceries after a long day at work, taking my kids to school. If people saw me and they needed a pothole fix, or they needed more policing in their neighborhood, or whatever it was they needed, they didn't hesitate. They don't hesitate to pull over their county commissioner, their mayor, their city councilman, because they understand our function. They know we're there. They elect us, and we know that we are there fundamentally to serve them. But they don't pull over the district attorney, because most people don't even know who their DA is. They don't know who the district attorney is, even though they checked the box and they voted for him time or her time and time again. So we have to pick up the phone and call these people up on the phone. And we have to tell them what kind of justice, because it really is only, we talk about smart justice and restorative justice and all these kinds of justice, and I get it, but there's really only one type of justice. And that's the justice that ensures liberty, justice, fairness for all people, irrespective of our color. And we have to acknowledge that with Black people, it doesn't matter whether we're well educated, where we live, where we work. We cannot educate ourselves. We cannot earn ourselves. We cannot move ourselves out of racism. And that is a fact. And we ought to look for people who are committed to representing the best interests of all and working specifically to undo those things that have caused the system to be so disproportionate. And those are the things we ought to be asking people when they run for district attorney. And if they're not willing to give us some answers, then they are not worthy of our votes.
Yeah. Wow. Man, that you hit right at 8 o'clock. There's some great comments going on here. You have enlightened us and educated us, especially as you brought out the differences or the lack of education that we have about the people who are serving us. Yeah, we know people out front, if we need some things changed on our streets, if we need things changed in our schools, we know who to talk to. But when it comes to the prosecutors, we don't often know their role. And so we, like you say, we just blindly check the box, and we got people staying in that particular office year after year after year. So it's very important for us to understand the power is in our hands. and that we must begin to get involved, educate ourselves about who our prosecutors are, and support those that are good, be there for us, that's going to be balanced with law, that's going to do the right thing. You and I said we don't want crime in our neighborhoods. We don't want I went in some neighborhoods, Brother Ellis, and I locked my door. I'm like, I'm locking my door because they look like, I don't care if I'm black. They don't look like they not racist at all out there. They won't, if they see me with a watch or I got a car, they will take that too. So, I mean, we all don't want crime in our communities. We just don't. We just want to be treated fairly when it comes to justice. That's all, right?
Yes, I agree, Pastor. And thank you for having me on the program tonight. I apologize to you and the audience for the technical glitch.
Oh, yeah.
And next time, you might not want to hand over your pulpit to me because I can run with it, Pastor.
Hey, sometimes a pulpit can be a pulpit pulling people out the pit. Sometimes the pulpit can sound like a whipping post for some folk, but it's all good because we can take truth. We all adults. We can take that truth and begin to examine it. It's like good chicken eating, right? You take the meat and leave the bone.
I love it. God bless you for your work.
Thank you.
And your ministry.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Thanks for the education.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Listen, this is Tackle the Shackles Out for Life. We have been streaming live on this podcast, and we've had an education tonight. And I'm telling you, my friend, Mr. Ellis, he delivered tonight. I learned some things. I went, I heard somebody else that put on there, I seen them type in, This is things that we are learning about our system. Listen, we got still the best system, I believe, in the whole entire world. But I also believe that we have a system that can be changed. And I'm talking about the criminal justice system. That definitely needs to be a change on it. Because if we're going to see the recidivism rate go down, it's going to require some laws to be changed. It's going to require some systems to be changed. And as you know, we want to make sure we work with our young people. There are some young people that are going in and being thrown into prison just because they're immature, just because they just don't know any better. And we got to help them know better. You're still guilty of the law, even though you don't know the law. And these are the things that we need to educate our communities. We need to go and pull our young people to the side and say, don't you know that that's a crime? And not be scared. We got adults scared of children. They're scared. When I grew up, listen, it was truly a village that raised the child. I mean, it took a village. And Miss Brown down the street, listen, by the time I got home, she already heard about what happened in the neighborhood. She pulled me over to the side, boy, and then the next neighbor got me before I got home. I got about 2 or 3 lectures before I got home and got that butt whooping by mama, because mama and daddy, they were not playing any games. We need now people who will be in the community to get justice involved, just as involved as anybody that to say, that's my family member, that's my loved one. Let's get some mentors. Let's get some mentors. Let's get some coaches. Let's get some people who volunteer in our schools. And let's go there and say, though you're not my child, you're still part of the family of the community. And if I do not get involved in your life and empower you, then there are going to be sometimes I might be one of your victims. And so the way we do it is say, hey, this is a community. This is a family. I have to treat you like you're my own child, and let us mentor the ones and preserve the ones that we need to preserve. Hey guys, thank you so much for being a part of Tackle the Shackles tonight. Thank you, buddy Curry, for being here, and thank you, Mr. Ellis, for being the professor tonight on the legal.
Thank you for having me
so much. We appreciate you.
bro.
Y'all have a wonderful rest of this evening. God bless you.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.